that everything in psychology is a trade-off. And then he expanded out and said that everything in life is a trade-off. And if anybody tries to tell you that that's not the case, they're lying to you, or they're ignorant and don't know themselves. And he started with talking about how traits and behaviors are selected and how they remain consistent across our species. He's talking from a psychological perspective here. Like this whole ramble, this wasn't on his slideshow about everything being a trade-off, but he went on this ramble because somebody asked him if all psychological traits are defined by our genes and natural selection and what behaviors are adaptive, in inverted commas, then why do things like depression still exist? Which is like, a reasonable argument. And this was his answer to the question. So he said, all traits and all behaviors have a level of costs and a level of benefits to your survival and reproduction, looking at it from this evolutionary perspective. He said a trait will persist in a species, in a population, if its benefits outweigh its costs, right? But that doesn't mean that the costs are zero. And he gave us the examples of personality traits that many people recognize, right? So, for example, openness to experience is seen for the most part as a positive trait, stereotypically. We associate it with creativity, and it's also highly correlated with sexual attraction, and sort of open-mindedness and things like this. But he said that doesn't mean there aren't costs. He said people high in openness to experience are very prone to psychoticism and unusual beliefs and dangerous beliefs. They're very mentally malleable, very mentally persuadable, where they can be captured by dangerous ideological beliefs or conspiratorial beliefs, which is a cost to openness to experience. But obviously the benefits have outweighed the cost, and that's why as a trait it's maintained itself across time. And then he linked it to the girl's question. He was like, neuroticism is seen stereotypically as a negative trait. It's proneness to negative emotion, proneness to anxiety and threat detection and things like this. And he said, obviously that's seen as a cost in our modern world, but there's also many benefits to being a little bit neurotic. It makes you vigilant. It means that you are aware of what's going on in your environment. It means you pick up on subtle social cues that people don't like you or do like you, so you have reinforcement of who to interact with more. You're aware of someone if they might be doing you wrong or that a situation is dangerous. And yes, sometimes people are too high in neuroticism, which can be a cost. There's the costs of proneness to depression and all those kind of things, which is an exact link to the girl's question of why it still exists. But because neuroticism on the whole has more benefits than costs, that's why it still exists. And that's why you get people that have clinical depression or people that are too high in neuroticism, or people that are very high in neuroticism, is because it's not like a set trait. There's obviously a spectrum where people have more or less of it, and there are some costs to things. And then he went on to say something along these lines, and I kind of expanded it to then go, right, what's the functional utility of thinking about this idea for our wider life? And that's that if anyone proposes a way of thinking, a way of feeling, a way of believing, a way of behaving in our lives, that is 100% beneficial and is the way to live, the way to think, the way to believe, the way to act, then they're lying. Or they're trying to persuade you to, buy their course or adopt their belief system. Because the reality is, everything in life is a trade-off. The things you desire, the things you aim for, the things you strive to do, all your beliefs, all the things you think about all the time, the people you spend your time with, it's all trade-offs. By doing one thing, by definition, you sacrifice the opportunity to do other things. Even if the thing you picked was good, right? There's always going to be a trade-off. Kind of what we talked about in an episode recently as well, about ambition blinding you to real reality. You pick a goal that you want to strive towards, but the trade-off of that is you miss so many other goals that you could be pursuing, or so many other things in your reality that could be noticed. And so the functional utility is understanding that this is the case. This is a law of the universe. And also then that there is no optimal way to approach life. We shouldn't spend our time trying to figure out and grasp what's the ideal way to think, an ideal way to act. The reality is there is trade-offs to everything. And that's something we can't get past. And so we should just embrace it and move with it. So, yeah, I think I addressed everything I wanted.
I like that. So from my understanding, as we've evolved, our brains had mutations which theoretically make us better at surviving. But whilst those mutations happen, there have been some traits that have developed as a byproduct, and we normally think of trade-offs as in life decisions and stuff, but this is something that's actually in our biology and psychology. There's probably like some biological things, like there's probably a trade-off to being strong, that we don't think of. And it ties into a lot of things that you've been speaking about how you don't like the word should, and how you should only take advice from two types of people. And it's it's how you, in adopting a similar reality to someone, you also need to consider the bad parts of what it takes to get there.
Yep.
I want to go into a bit deeper into what you should do if you're quite neurotic, because I know you say you're particularly psychologically neurotic, and kind of what that looks like practically. And I also wanted to say, this is like our individually, maybe we're seen as also quite open, and that's kind of the foundations of this podcast. And so the good side is we get to see things that other people don't. We get to talk about things that maybe impact someone, with our goal of making someone think a little bit differently. But then this is where all the negativity comes from about what we're saying is just waffle. So that's the trade-off that we have. But
yeah. It's true, man. I'll just address that second point because that's the smaller one first. Yeah, we make a trade-off. I get a massive benefit from doing this because it enables me to talk about shit that in normal, mundane life you just rarely get to. Me and you basically have a scheduled deep chat once or twice a week for an hour or more. We get to just go through shit we've been thinking about, or talk to an interesting person, and we can address ideas that just you wouldn't talk about in mundane human life, which is fine, but there's a part of me that wants to do this. But the cost of that is that, well, people have an opinion of that. People think it's weird. People think it's yap. People think it's waffle. That's the trade-off, like you said. So yeah, 100% agree. The neuroticism point, yeah, it kind of links to what we talked with Kate about on the last episode, which will, there's probably the one coming out after that, or 2 episodes ago maybe. But her poem about sensitivity, right? Well, sensitivity is kind of just it's not far away from neurotic. It just means that you're very aware of the threats or potential threats in the world. You're prone to anxiety, you're prone to depression, you're prone to feel things on a very, very deep level. And I do relate to that. And so my advice would be that it's not just a negative thing. It might make your life more mentally complicated. It might mean that your mind is a storm a lot of the time, but you have this deeper awareness of things. You can connect with reality in a deeper way. It kind of gives you a level of empathy, an emotional understanding of yourself and others, which is a key skill for building great social relationships. And so, kind of like my lecturer said, it's not we can't look at it from only one side. I reckon a lot of the great, think about it, I guess this is a common thing that I've talked about with different people across my life, but the best musicians, for example, are people that have made music out of pain. I listened to a song like Make You Feel My Love by Adele, right? She wrote that when she was 19. That's younger than us. You listen to that song, it has so much power in it. But it's a song made from pain, I guess. It's her wanting to love somebody. And you could only really be prone to the uncomfortable negative emotions in life, being high in neuroticism, to create something like that. And there's something beautiful in that.
Yeah, I had written down that neuroticism would allow you to make better art. I guess my thought pattern was like, well, is the positives going to outweigh the increase in anxiety and depression? Like, it just seems to me like that sucks that you've been dealt this hand in life where you feel things, and you experience negative emotion more, and you could try and put that into a positive, and embrace that neuroticism. And I think that's probably the only way out, but it doesn't seem like a very nice way out.
Well, think about it this way. The fact that it exists, if we take my lecturer's biological perspective, the fact that traits like neuroticism exist is because at some point in our evolutionary history, they allowed our ancestors to survive and reproduce. Because if you had a tribe, if you just go theoretical and all like waffly evolutionary psychology for a moment, imagine a tribal environment, right, with zero neuroticism, so zero emotional vigilance, zero threat detection, zero proneness to fear and anxiety. Well, they're just going to die because they're not going to make smart decisions. They're not going to consider the potential threats in an environment. They're not going to be more emotionally aware of their tribe mates, and there's not going to be as sophisticated social dynamics, which we know is one of the key factors of our human culture becoming what it has become. And so you need it. You need to feel things. You need to. Now, you might have it in a greater dose, and that's the hand you've been dealt in life, and it might mean that you face certain issues more than other people, and you feel things more deeply. Okay, we can moan about that if you want. But it's something that provided our ancestors with value. And so it can provide you with some value in your life if you manage it. And I'm not saying that's simple or easy, but it's. I wouldn't trade mine, I guess. You know, and I'm not clinically depressed. I don't want to make it sound like I'm just washing over shit like that. Like, that stuff is real and hard and unnecessary suffering that we don't need really. But if you're just somebody that's more sensitive and feels things more deeply, that means you have a different connection to reality than other people. And that's something to celebrate, I guess.